Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Across students, management of Achimota School, friends of Achimota. On behalf of the OA, I want to first say a big thank you to each and every one of you for making time to be here with us tonight. Just by way of background, this is Achimota Speaks, and a platform by the OA to give voice to all of us Ghanaians, not just Achimotans, on issues that literally keep us up at night. This is our 8th year of Achimota Speaks. Achimota Speaks started when Achimota School turned 90, 8 years ago. And at the time, it was a monthly occurrence. We had 12 editions in that Jubilee year. And post that, the decision was to do Achimota Speaks twice a year. Once to commemorate or around Achimota School's Founders Day, and the second one around Speech Day. And that because at the core, Achimota is an educational institution, that the first one every year, the one around March, which is Founders Day, be focused on education. And the second one is then focused on whatever is most topical for all of us as a nation at the time. So this month, this year, the first edition of Achimota Speaks is what has brought us all here today. And our topic for discussion is the free SHS concept. What reforms are required? Just by way of background, I would say that most of us will agree that our educational system today is challenged. In my mind, that there should be support for every Ghanaian to get some level of education is not a debate. The debate is in the house. Indeed, it's not a new venture. Kwame Nkrumah, back in the days, maybe for him it was easier because at the time it was a geography. You say from here upwards, it's free. But today, should we still consider education as free for everybody, whether you can pay or not? Are there reforms required? Our keynote speaker, Mr. Akwesi Adaiboahen, will share his thoughts with us. And after that, we have a very eminent group of panelists who will dissect the topic even further. After which, of course, we will invite questions, thoughts from the floor. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Akwesi Adaiboahen is an expert in the education system and policy reform, strategy design, management, and implementation of large-scale educational reform initiatives in Ghana, with over 30 years of demonstrated professional experience. He also specializes in designing adaptive learning ecosystems within diverse and complex stakeholder environments, creating partnerships and strengthening engagements. He has led large-scale national policy and curriculum reforms, particularly in pre-tertiary and teacher education levels. He completed his graduate studies at the University of Havana and completed additional studies at the Institute of Statistical, Social, and Economic Research, ISA, of the University of Ghana. Edinburgh University, McGill University, Leicester University School of Education, and the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration are other institutions our keynote speaker has attended. He is an alum of the HP Cambridge Partnership for Education Fellowship. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we invite, I nearly said Accra. We'll make you an honorary Accra after this. Akwesi Adaiboyen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first and foremost ask us if our public education system, Ghana's public education system, if it was an aircraft, let me see how many of us want to fly in that aircraft. How many of us? Exactly. So I agree with you. That is where we are. And you know, in the aircraft industry, we have all kinds of experts working at different times. And what they do is that they try as much as possible to ensure that there is zero error. They work in a coordinated manner in such a way that the flight engineers, the air traffic controllers, the pilots, the ground staff, and everybody work in unison in such a way that the aircraft flies safely. Our public education system, if you ask me, I will not fly that. What it means is that what we have done over the years is that we've crashed hundreds of jumbo jets, and probably all the people perished. Only a few survived. And that is why we are going to try to avoid. So I am excited to be here. I'm really very happy because this is a topic that I think is gained a lot of currency and everybody's talking about it. We all are seeking solutions. So I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and honoring me with this opportunity. I am deeply honored to have been selected for this significant event, which is going to discuss this important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, the free senior high school policy has emerged as a critical topic in political, social discussions, and consequently, I will try to be as dispassionate as possible in my discourse. Evaluating the path of the policy has been implemented for the past 8 years without political favoring. And I think this is going to be very challenging to do. Still, as citizens, we must unite in our commitment to contribute to its success. And therefore, irrespective of the position that I would take in delivering this paper, I would expect that we will take it in the spirit of contributing to the perfection of the policy, because we all want it to succeed. Consequently, today's discussion is situated within this broader context of the national stakeholder consultation that is currently ongoing, which aims to assess the entire education system, including the free senior high school policy. This presentation contributes to the national dialogue, striving to ensure that the policy profoundly impacts our country. Ladies and gentlemen, you recall the history of free secondary education in this country, and the President mentioned that. Since independence, the country's northern regions have benefited from the free secondary education under the Northern Scholarship Scheme in response to addressing the serious need to use education to speed up the economic and social transformation of that part of the country. Today, many professionals, scholars, academicians, politicians, prominent individuals have emerged from the visionary investment of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, our first president. These individuals are contributing to the development of this country. In southern Ghana, the Ghana Cocoa Board also offered scholarships and bursaries to learners whose parents were cocoa farmers. It was assumed that these tireless farmers needed to be supported. And again, in addition to that, we all know, and some of us have benefited, government directly issued scholarships through the Scholarship Secretariat to various persons. Ladies and gentlemen, these examples is to recognize that secondary education has the potential to transform our country. Article 25(1)(b) of the 1992 Constitution also states that secondary education in its different forms, including technical and vocational education, shall be made generally available and accessible to all by every appropriate means, and in particular by the progressive introduction of free education. In addition to the constitutional obligation of the government of Ghana to work towards the introduction of free education, Goal 4.1 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals states, by 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete equitable and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. In response to this constitutional provision and a global imperative, the government of Ghana launched a strategy in 2015 to progressively implement a free senior high school. This initiative, in the mind of those who initiated the government, it considered it a more pragmatic and calculated approach to eventually achieving the goal of making senior high school education free and accessible. The second part of this is the one that was launched in 2017. And this, to me, represents the country's boldest effort to universalize free secondary education to fulfill the long-standing constitutional and multilateral promise. The policy's most evident intent is for the government to absorb all parents' financial obligations to schooling, which previously constituted barriers just beyond tuition to the government of Ghana. Therefore, the free senior high school policy introduced in 2017 covers the fees of all public senior high school students. And the key elements of this policy is that it will cover tuition fees, boarding fees, meals, textbooks, and other charges which previously were covered by parents. And it is also applied to all Ghanaian students who are admitted to public senior high schools. The government continues to provide infrastructure, including buildings, furniture, and teaching materials, and parents are not expected to make any contribution. The policy also reserves 30% of placement in elite schools for students from junior high schools, public junior high schools. The policy also introduced a comprehensive, and this is where I want us to be interested. The policy also introduced a comprehensive set of administrative and operational directives and guidelines designed to address the specific financial, administrative, and operational loopholes and weaknesses within the secondary education delivery system. The immediate impact of the policy is that it increased access for many students. In fact, enrollment surged that year, setting a new record compared to earlier years. A new record was set in 2017-2018 academic year with the highest enrollment ever recorded in the country, which was 378,499. And mind you, this data I'm quoting is from EMIS of the Ministry of Education. I've seen other data different from this, also from the Ministry of Education. So let's work with what we have. So as a result of this, in 2018-2019, the enrollment increased again to 88% of learners who completed junior high school. And in 2016-17, it was 66% of the learners. It moved to 77% and then to 88%. Then in 2019-2020, possibly due to COVID, it dropped to 82%. And then further dropped in 2020-2021 to 76%. And then in 2021-2022, it increased to 97%. Currently in 2023-2024, which is the last data that I had from MS, it is 92% of all learners who completed junior high school. Specific implementation drivers ultimately influence the overall impact of the policy. This includes a robust, centrally controlled school placement system, centralized procurement of food supplies managed by the Ghana Buffer Stock Company, and a double-track system to address school overcrowding resulting from increased student admissions. The Free Senior High School Secretariat was also established to oversee the computerized selection system, manage data, and coordinate resource allocation for implementing the policy. But of course, with all these infrastructure and systems set in motion, there occurred some major challenges that I want us to focus on from now on. The initiative to prepare young people to meet global skills, competencies, and labor demands was undoubtedly commendable. However, developing and implementing this policy encountered significant challenges that undermined the program's potential. Crafted with minimal stakeholder engagement and driven mainly to fulfill a political promise, and with a certain sense of equalization, this policy created uneasiness within the educational landscape and among stakeholders. What began as a promising and transformative policy with a capacity to catalyze our nation's economic and social advancement became mired in political maneuvering, administrative obstacles, and political debates, which diluted its intended benefits. The politicization of this initiative eclipsed invaluable insights during its execution, leading to the cascading errors. As a result, we lost the opportunity to forge a more consistent, robust, cohesive, and sustainable foundation for the social maintenance of the Ghanaian society. Moreover, this policy lacked a holistic approach, failing to encompass secondary education's three crucial global drivers, which is access, relevance, and equity. The myriad challenges attached to its implementation hindered a thorough resolution of relevance and equity issues. Consequently, the efforts before 2021 predominantly centered on enhancing access, leaving other critical dimensions inadequately addressed. Making senior high school accessible without intentionally addressing issues of equity, relevance, and quality is in an interrelated way is not impactful. Equity issues are foundational to sustainable and national development. Therefore, the free senior high school policy development should have seriously considered the challenges faced by schools, especially those in the categories B, C, and D, which lacked essential teaching and learning resources, infrastructure, and teachers. These schools should have been treated differently to ensure admitted students receive the same benefits as those in the so-called Category A schools. The policy could not assume that the needs of the various categories of schools were the same. One of the policy's significant challenges is the lack of dedicated funds to meet the cost of school feeding and operational expenses. The Ministry of Finance release of funds has been erratic and inconsistent, and making supplier payments a serious issue. Subsequently, school managers sometimes struggle to provide students with adequate and quality food and were understandably frustrated. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Education and GS did not deliberately try to leverage the support of PTAs and parents, even when schools critically needed essential food and supplies. I would now want to focus on some specific detailed challenges that were inherent in the policy. The policy, as we speak, still does not cover all students who graduate from junior high school. Data from 2017-2018 to 2023-2024 academic year show that 565,684 students were not enrolled in senior high school. That's 500,000. While 3.2 million were enrolled. The question we have to ask ourselves is, why these potential students not enrolled? That's a big question we need to answer. A study conducted by African Education Watch found that between 2017-18 academic year and 2021-22 academic year, the average government spending per student under the free senior high school policy was 1,241 cedis, with parents spending 4,185 cedis per annum. This means the private cost of 70.35% of senior high school education is far higher than what the taxpayer, which is 29.65, pays through the free senior high school policy. This is one reason why many more children can still take advantage of the policy. The budgetary requirements for implementing such a policy were significant as the policy progressed into the second and third years of execution. Between 2017 and 2018 and 2023-2024 academic years, a total of 12.88 billion cedis was allocated to the free senior high school policy, averaging 1.84 billion annually. It challenged the government's educational finances and crowded out critical investment for other sectors. The centralized placement system and its imperfections resulted in some students being assigned as day students far from their parents' residences. This prompted some parents to secure local private hostels, which raised a significant safeguarding concerns. As a result, many parents felt frustrated by the added expenses and the safety of their children. The introduction of the double-track system to address overcrowding frustrated school managers and teachers, leading to an unpredictable school calendar that disrupted school administrations. The free senior high school secretariat excessive control over admissions and data undermines school managers' ability to enforce discipline and address the students' admissions and progression issues. It also leaves them powerless to tackle the ongoing problem of student absenteeism. The proposed benefits of smaller classes, increased contact hours, and improved learning outcomes were not realized because of the slow progress of delivering supplementary school infrastructure. I can go on and on, but let me jump this because I'm sure a lot of these challenges are well known to us, and probably focus on where we should be going, because that is why this discussion will be very, very important. But before I do this, I would like to just give us a hint of what globally is happening in secondary education. In a world marked by volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambitious challenges, countries face an intricate landscape filled with unprecedented crises, opportunities, and transformations. This unpredictable environment urges education ministries worldwide to enact reforms that redefine the knowledge, skills, and values young people must acquire for their future. Education has become a powerful tool in response to our dynamic world, with secondary education emerging as a vital space for cultivating the next generation of citizens. To achieve this, schools and communities must evolve into platforms that equip the youth with 21st century skills, social and emotional learning, character development, and essential literacy and numeracy skills. Current global priorities for secondary education focus on providing expanded and equitable access to relevant, high-quality curricula. This essential goal is central to secondary education discussions and emerging reform agenda. Consequently, Many countries are committed to enhancing and reforming their secondary education systems to meet national needs and align effectively with the global educational landscape. Secondary education is also a vital stepping stone, empowering young individuals to embark on healthy and productive adult lives filled with meaningful social, political, and economic contributions. The world demands that young people equip themselves with new skills, knowledge, and competence that will allow them to flourish in a dynamic and interconnected labor market, embracing digitalization, automation, and groundbreaking technological advancement from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, data science to blockchain will redefine the content of education now. Additionally, as the global economic, social, and technological landscape shifts, the importance of lifelong learning, unlearning, regulate emotions effectively. Ultimately, educational success transcends the mere acquisition of knowledge. It lies in our capacity to extrapolate from one experience and creatively apply our understanding to new, exciting situations. According to a study conducted by the Learning Policy Institute based in California, USA, there is a growing consensus, and I'm quoting, there is a growing consensus around the need to redesign schools from the standardized factory model we have inherited to one that can enable powerful learning and thriving for every student. Redesigning schools for deeper and more equitable learning requires systematic approaches that cultivate strong, supportive relationships and positive climate, enable rich, engaging, student-centered learning, implement meaningful family and community engagement, and foster integrated student support that foster health and well-being for students. Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the new pathway for addressing weaknesses in secondary education provision to create a more prosperous future for the next generation of Ghanaians. This is why in 2020, a pivotal discussion commenced here in Ghana around the need for secondary education to evolve, ensuring that the curriculum is attuned to the demands of the 21st century. Today, thanks to the generous funding from MasterCard Foundation and expert guidance from TTEL, the Ministry of Education, through the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, is proud to unveil a new transformative secondary education curriculum. This curriculum is intended to foster the spirit of lifelong learning and prepare students for the world of work and responsible adult lives. It will also equip them to thrive in the competitive landscape of the global knowledge economy, empowering them to excel in the ever-evolving world. So, based on this global trend, what are we to do in this country? What are we to do as a country to resolve the challenges that we have? And I will take us through a few. There are a lot, but again, I will not read everything. I would focus on the most important ones. The government should thoroughly review the foundational assumptions made in designing the policy to make it cost-efficient, equitable, and effective in using secondary education as a tool for transformation. The essence of the policy is to provide access to all young people so that they can use the path of secondary education to achieve their maximum potential. We will need to design a model built around equity and not equality, which is focused on acquiring skills, competencies, and character values, which are essential, the essential of the 21st century. This is why I get worried about propositions on implementing cutoff points for admissions to senior high schools. And I know this is a popular position that many of us have taken. Proponents of these cutoff points argue that this would decrease the number of students admitted annually into an already overcrowded dormitories and classrooms. Additionally, they claim that introducing a cutoff point will address the challenge of the significant number of students who enter senior high schools with poor literacy and numeracy skills, and as a result are not benefiting from the investment made in senior high school education. These arguments appear logical initially, but they raise serious fundamental, ideological, and equity concerns and undermine Ghana's long-term sustainable development goal. These students primarily come from under-resourced and disadvantaged junior high schools nationwide, with certain regions being more heavily impacted. They are mainly children of resource-poor farmers, fishermen, traders, and others who are already grappling with the challenges posed by our bleak economic development landscape. Educating their children may be the only viable way to foster hope for their future. Consequently, the solution lies not in imposing barriers for this large number of learners, but in investing heavily in the country's primary and junior high schools to ensure considerable improvements in infrastructure, teaching and learning resources, and teacher availability. Qualified, dedicated, and motivated teachers must teach all our learners. The policy must research the barriers keeping some students out of its scope. Although there may be other reasons, one is tempted to believe that these are candidates whose parents cannot afford to raise money to cover the cost of admission prospectus. In other instances, these learners may not meet the minimum grades required. Both cases present significant potential drawbacks for the policy. The government should enhance all grades D, C, and B schools in the next few years to meet the extent of what is offered to every student, no matter the school's location. The goal should be to create equitable chances for every learner to succeed, irrespective of the school's location. The government must establish a dedicated, transparent, and sustainable funding framework. And when I talk about framework, I'm looking at, within that framework, we look at all the different perspectives in terms of who needs to be supported, who needs not to be supported, which is discussed and agreed on by our collective stakeholders. This should be achieved through a continuous national stakeholder consultative process to ensure a transparent financing model that thoroughly addresses the policy's delivery cost and secures the full support of key stakeholders. The framework should address the specific funding needs of every learner, utilize resources from the private sector, and enable parents' contributions through PTAs and alumni to fill government funding gaps. The scope of free senior high school provision should move beyond the mere expansion of fee-free access. We must consider providing relevant quality education to all learners nationwide. With a new curriculum in place, what needs to happen quickly is provide the required teaching and learning resources, infrastructure, and teachers needed in every school to ensure the successful implementation of this groundbreaking curriculum. The government cannot mandate system transformation through policy because it cannot implement innovations in the classroom. However, teachers, school administrators can be fully responsible for implementing reforms at the school level. The government should therefore support building and communicating the case for change and articulate a comprehensive vision for the free senior high school policy that ultimately address the issues of access, relevance, and equity. The ministry needs to establish a long-term vision to enhance school management, focus on fulfilling the mandates of schools as institutions designed to train young people and prepare them for the future. To achieve this, the GES must delegate decision-making concerning school operations, including admissions, teaching and learning resources, and students' feeding and welfare, to school managers and hold them accountable. This accountability would entail the school management is responsible for academic excellence and the progression of learners. What will happen in this case is that there may be some schools that will quickly begin to excel and begin to ensure that they achieve the maximum results, performance results that the ministry or the GES expects. In turn, these schools remain accountable to their stakeholders. The government can facilitate a paradigm shift by establishing ambitious goals to promote innovation, create opportunities for autonomy, choice, and competition, empower change agents, encourage risk-taking, and recognize and highlight success instead of the current approach where schools are mandated through broad policy directives and quality standards. We have reached a point where we should trust the competence, responsibility, and creativity and innovative capabilities of the people we put in charge of our schools. And what I mean by this is that there are some schools who, when are given the autonomy, could run and successfully run and deliver all the quality standards that the Ministry of Education expects. And we should be going in this direction, helping schools to stand on their own, be independent, and let them recognize that they are centers of learning, which have responsibility to their stakeholders. And this, I believe, will be the way for the future. The Ghana Education Service ought to hire more school managers and teachers and deploy them equitably across all schools to alleviate the workload of some teachers, particularly those in double-track schools. The needs of schools that lack teachers in critical subjects areas should be addressed urgently. I've been going around the country talking to schools, and I realized that in some schools, some teachers have not gone on vacation sometimes for a whole year, until recently when the ministry issued a directive that they should be allowed to go on leave. It is just unpardonable. We cannot run our teachers in this way and expect them to be effective. The government should also promote school and local industry partnerships to promote portfolio building and develop learner skills in senior high schools and TVET institutions in line with the 21st century classroom practices. The Ministry of Education should refrain from centralizing food procurement and supplies, as this may result in erratic availability and shortages of essential commodities. Providing unreliable and low-quality food at the school level can adversely affect students' health and nutrition. And I'm sure the students know what I'm talking about. The ministry should refrain from silencing the voices of school managers who dare to be independent and speak out about the challenges schools face. It is unwarranted and should not be tolerated. Now, to help us conclude on these discussions, which I'm sure the panelists would go deeper into, I just want to conclude now. As a nation, we must champion a holistic approach to education that empowers our youth with unparalleled opportunities for success. By equipping our children with essential 21st century skills, fostering social and emotional learning, and promoting character development, literacy, and numeracy, we can prepare the next generation of Ghanaians to thrive and contribute meaningfully to the global knowledge economy. While expanding access to education is crucial, we must equally prioritize ensuring that secondary education is of the highest quality and relevance. The stark reality is that we neglect to invest in secondary education's transformative power. If we neglect investing in secondary education's transformative power, we risk undermining its potential for future generations. Let us embrace these 4 key ideas as the pillars for achieving accessible, equitable, and high-quality secondary education in Ghana. Number 1, we need to seek to be increasing participation and equity. What does this mean? It means that we should expand equitable access to secondary education for every learner in every location in Ghana, ensuring that no child is left behind. 2, enhance quality of student achievement. This means that we should elevate academic performance and progression for all students by providing adequate teaching and learning resources and implementing rigorous monitoring, assessment, and evaluation of the new curriculum. And then number 3, boost relevance of secondary education. This means that we should continuously reform the curriculum to align with the expectations of the global knowledge landscape and the evolving job market. Number 4, establish sustainable funding. This means that we should create a collaborative, responsive funding model that ensures that the education sector remains well supported and does not jeopardize other vital areas of public finance. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we can craft the most visionary policies with the noblest intentions, akin to the state-of-the-art hardware. However, without fostering an environment where these policies and their execution are fully understood and embraced by all stakeholders, they will falter. Thank you, esteemed guests, for your patience and attentive ears and engaging hearts. I believe that I have managed to raise your appetite for a very good discussion this evening. And I'm hoping that out of here, we can agree on some issues that are of importance for us to drive forward our goal of achieving quality secondary education for every child. Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening. Please, another round of applause. I think he did a really great job. Let's do a better job with that. Thank you very much. So many thanks to our keynote speaker, Mr. Adai Boahene, for those very insightful suggestions. My name is Jifa Bampo. I'm Accra, 1993. I want to say thanks once again to OAA executives, the planning committee, for another opportunity to moderate this session. So at this point, I'll call on our other panelists to join us. Let's call on private legal practitioner, Ace Ankoma. Please, a round of applause for him. I was telling him outside that it looks like for Achimota Speaks, we like MUBA guys, because last year we had Moses Baden, and that was a good session, and we're having him as well this year. Let me call on Irama Benin, if she's with us. And certainly last but not least, Professor Steve Ade. A round of applause, please. Tertiary also Training College deserves a round of applause, please. Your mic. So many thanks to our panelists for agreeing to join us, and at least we've had the tone set by our keynote speaker. Coincidentally, we had this session last year on the 22nd of March, and at the time we were talking about innovative funding strategies for education. And this seems to be a really good segue, because much as we did speak at the time about how we could better implement free SHS, at the time there didn't seem to be the willingness as a nation to have that open and detailed conversation. But I think we've come full circle and we've agreed that these are things we need to talk about. So based on the things that have been said, a few things have been happening in the last 2 weeks. We've had the National Education Stakeholders Forum. We've also had the Catholic Education Conference, because they are also part owners of a lot of the schools. And then we've also had the budget read, which many of us were waiting for in great anticipation to see what kind of numbers were going to be thrown at funding free SHS. So I think we've been given a bit on that. I'll just share a bit of those figures with you. But the government has decided to uncap Get Fund. According to them, that will release some 4.1 billion cedis in addition to the 3.5, which they're giving in addition. But we are told that there will be no more funding from the ABFA. So it raises issues of where do we still get extra money to fund free SHS fully. I also understand that about 70% of free SHS funding is really food and operations. So the question is infrastructure, addressing the needs for school blocks, science blocks, equipment, dormitories, and the like. We just saw the unfortunate loss of dormitories at Laboni Senior High School. So these are many, many things to discuss. So since ladies first, I'll be a bit biased. I'll start with you, Irama, and ask you, for you, what immediately are some of the reforms you would like to see as a parent? What you think are low-hanging fruits that, if addressed, could make a quick and significant impact?
Let me tell you a short story. So, a young man comes from rural Ghana, and he has benefactors who have decided to sponsor him for to study in Accra. So he's brought from somewhere in the central region. He comes to Accra, does extra classes. He isn't taken into his JHS, his preferred JHS. He goes back, does better, is taken by the private JHS. Eventually, he writes his WASI exam. Now, his school decides that they will not allow those in Form 2 to write the exam because they will spoil the results, as they say. They'll only let Form 3 students who have finished the syllabus write the exam so that they can get into their first choice schools, and then they will also be able to raise the standard of the school. What happens is the Form 2 parents decide that they will register their children in public schools so that they can have a shot at the BEC exam. And the Form 3s who have finished the syllabus write the exam under their school name. Guess what happens? I'm sure some of you can already guess. Those in Form 3, none of them get their first choice schools, even though they have finished the syllabus. And those in Form 2 who are just trying their hands at it and go to the public schools end up in their first choice schools. What does that tell us about the system? And how do you think this affects the heart of the young man who is now in Form 3? He doesn't get his first choice, but gets his second choice schools. And all those he left behind in the village have got their first choice schools. They didn't have any extra classes. They weren't helped in any way. And it was COVID. So, they didn't study much, but they still got into their first choice schools. He worked hard. He stayed up at night. He wasn't allowed to rest. There were home teachers all the time. And yet, he doesn't make it. The free SHS reforms and how we are tinkering with education isn't just, it's breaking the morale of those who are working hard. I know a house help who is doing all she can to put her child into a good school. And so she sends all her money home so that her child can go to a private JHS. What happens to her? Similar. So the more we tinker with education and play with the results in the name of trying to make it accessible to those who do not have access, we actually cut some of them out. So the first thing I'll say is stop tinkering with the results. Let it be according to those who have done well. For those who have done well, they should have the opportunity to go to the schools they want to go to. And for those who need help, we should provide the help they need. It's not possible to send a child who doesn't have the foundations into a Category A school to go and learn under teachers who don't have the specialized skills to raise children who don't have the foundations. What you actually do is you break their morale. They go into the classroom They see all these kids who are doing well based on their merit, based on how well they actually can do. And they realize, I don't fit here.
So your concern is you want to see a merit-based system
I want to see a
that
merit-based
rewards
system.
young
Yes.
people who've worked hard.
Worked hard.
The discrimination, if I want to be blunt, against what may seem to be private school kids is unfair.
Is unfair. And not just private school kids. And it's not just the private school kids. Even those who are in public schools, who are pushed into schools that they haven't worked hard for, get there and they know they don't fit. And they struggle. We don't make it any easier for them. So I think it's unfair for all the children that what we should do is provide an opportunity for those who are struggling to get the extra help they need so that they can be raised to the standard that we want them to have. We shouldn't simply award them the marks because we want them to be in a space. Yes.
All right. So Keynote, I knew that you're going to come in. So it's good for you to come in at this point. Mr. Adaibuahene. Yes.
Thank you very much. This seemed to be a concern that many, many people have. You see, and I like the way you put it, that we should probably adopt a meritorious system of placement, which would, like we had before, when I came from a very remote village, like probably Prof. Atene said, you also, a very remote village. From one, I passed to Achimota school, and my dad didn't have money at the time. So second choice, second year, I decided to do another school. But the point is this. You see, all this comes back to the inefficient use of our educational resources. Because I have been to many, not 10, not 20, junior high schools. And for all the 10 subjects, there are only 2 teachers teaching. I'm telling you, I've been to a senior high school where the children sit on the floor. You see, so if already they
are disadvantaged from the start.
They are disadvantaged, and we also want to adopt a meritorious system. Then, effectively, what we have done is that we have built in a system that is not equitable. So for me, if we had the system such that every school has the minimum, because in this school we don't have the minimum standards that every school should have so that we call it a school. Go to villages, you'll find a shed with 2 teachers and with maybe 15 children, and then they say it's a junior high school. That obviously is abusing the rights of those children. So for me, I would support that when we have pushed enough our government to ensure that we, as a collective, as a country, we have standards, minimum standards for a school. So that if you cannot set up the school, don't call it a school. Don't go and put some village market hats, and then children are sitting under, and then you say it's a school. Then they also write BEC. Then, in that case, using the meritorious system might not probably be the way forward. And I would say that the excessive use of this of the placement system away from the managers of the school probably is one of the difficult decisions we need to take if we have to reform senior high school. Because heads of schools are the ones who need to be in control of the numbers and who they think can be accommodated in the schools. But the current system, as we have, heads of schools are not involved in any way. You just sit somewhere in your school and then the computer will start popping up names of people you do not know from Adam, and they come. I have been to a school just last year, this last admissions that they did. Sometimes I feel ashamed. We did an assessment, and with class 2 questions, class 4 questions, class 6 questions. I'm telling you, more than 40% And the school is not, it's not a grade A school, but it's not a grade C school. More than 40% of the kids failed. So in other words, it falls partly into what we are discussing. But at the same time, it also means that somebody is not doing their job somewhere. And we have to address that.
So minimum standards for what a school should be, at least reform looking in that, and then ensuring that the system allows the students to learn and do better. Let me come to Ace and Kuma, because the other debate that happened last year had to do with whether we should have legislation that embeds free senior high school so that no government would stop it. I guess now that we know that review is not cancellation, and the fact that we didn't necessarily need that law, we've all come to that point. But there is a pre-tertiary education legislation which says secondary education in all its different forms, including TVET, should be free and accessible to all eligible candidates. Are there any legal requirements that we must adhere to or introduce to ensure that the free SHS continues smoothly? I've heard people say there is no policy. I'm not exactly sure about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, free senior high school probably doesn't require legislation. It is a constitutional requirement with qualifications. Now, let me get as blunt as I get and get into trouble. Will we be having this conversation if the government provided enough money to build the schools and hire the teachers and feed the children? Would we be having this discussion at all? So are we just admitting that what we call free education or free senior high school was the government maybe increasing how much it gave to education and spreading it to cover everybody, so that now it is thin and it's affected the quality? Is that why we are sitting here? I mean, I don't want us to mask it under anything. Basically, the government gave money and the money is not enough. So they can hire more teachers, they can build more schools, they can feed the children, they can pay the teachers, they can clothe the children, and that's why we are here. Well, to when? So what do we consider as education fees? I think it's two broad categories: tuition and then non-tuition. All right. What people do not realize, and many of us went through school without realizing it, every Ghanaian child that goes to a public school has free tuition. It's a standard bursary. Everybody gets it. All right? And then when we get to the non-tuition, some got it first based on which part of Ghana they came from. So if you're from northern Ghana, you automatically got a free non-tuition bursary. If you got the CMB scholarship, in the presumption that you were a ward of a cocoa farmer, and we know that, I may be wrong, but a greater percentage of those who benefited cannot identify a cocoa tree from a palm nut tree. Okay, am I speaking the truth? Yeah. And then some got government bursaries, and so that got taken care of. So the reality is that apart from these students from the south who got these, and the students in the north who got it blanketly, the people paying were those from the south who did not qualify for the CMB or government scholarship. Period. Anecdote. I know a lady who says that her mother changed, she was born up north. She had an English name and a non-northern name, an Akan name. And the mother was advised that change the names of your children, else they will not benefit from the free school in the north. So she changed the names of her children. So the name she bears now was not her name at birth. Free name. Now, so let's get real. So the Constitution provides for free education. The famous Article 25, which says that all persons shall have the right to, quote, equal educational opportunities and facilities, unquote. And it manifests in 3 ways. Free education, compulsory for basic. Secondary has 3 qualifications. 1, it should be generally available and accessible. So those of you who say that the rich must pay, watch it. See, it should be generally available and accessible. 2, it should be by every appropriate means. And 3, especially by progressively introducing free education. Because this is for free education, I won't highlight too much on the parallel provision for tertiary education. So what did they mean by free? Was it just tuition? Didn't the framers of the Constitution know at the time they were writing the Constitution in 1992 that a lot of education was free, at least tuition was free? So in telling us that we should have free education, were they giving to us something we already had? That cannot be the case. So they clearly meant the non-tuition aspect of fees. And I think that, and so if we're supposed to, and it's supposed to be progressively, if it already existed. So I believe that the concept of free education goes beyond just tuition. But, and so progressively, I understand to mean steadily, in stages. Basically, obian fosoye. We're supposed to do it steadily and in stages. So one day we decided that we have achieved it. Are we able to say, you know what, we really haven't achieved it? And so would want to abandon the conclusion and get back to progressive. Now, I can see that it's immediately flashing red flags in your mind that can you scale back if it was supposed to be an aspiration progressively and you proclaim that you have attained the aspiration. Are you able to reverse the aspiration to say, we said it, but we lied?
But Mr. Nkoma, I remember last year when Mr. Kofi Asare was here, he said something instructive, that in many parts of the world, for secondary school, especially for boarding, nobody has it free. It's because we've chosen the most expensive path, which we cannot afford, which is why we find ourselves in this predicament. So we've done this for 80 years. It's only a person who hasn't made a mistake before that does not change their mind. We can always come back and make a decision on how we go.
I haven't concluded on what I even think about it. I'm just highlighting the issues, right? That are you able to reverse it? Let them say do whatever they do everywhere in the world. We lined up in 1992 and voted into effect a constitution for ourselves, which says that we will do this progressively. It is binding on you and it is binding on me. And as we go on, I will refer to 2 cases that went to the Supreme Court on the right of education. I had the privilege of being the lawyer in one of them. And see the thinking of the Supreme Court that we cannot really divorce what we are doing from the legal perspective. In fact, my recommendation will be, and if I get a chance to speak again, that when the structure of the reforms have been put down, the ministry should submit it to the Attorney General's Department for an opinion. Because we may do all of this, and it might go to the Supreme Court, and it will be struck out that, you know what, we don't care what they do anywhere in the world. Here, this is what our Constitution says. And the Constitution, in fact, the last in 2011, the Supreme Court said that it is not applying the Universal Declaration on Human Rights provisions on free education. We have our own, and we must look at our circumstances. So I've talked too much, but there's more to do. But also, let me quickly say that the Article 25 that I just read to you is also read with Article 38, which the Supreme Court has held qualifies even the qualifications we have. Because there, when it talks about education, it contains 2 critical riders. It says, to the greatest extent feasible. So there's a feasibility thing, which might link with what you are saying, that is what we are doing feasible. The second one, it says, subject to the availability of resources, quote and unquote. So the right to free education under Article 25 is, with all its nuances, is further qualified by these 2 key phrases. To the greatest extent feasible, 1. 2, subject to the availability of resources. This is what probably should get us to pause and think that did we really achieve it? Because the resources we have are the resources able to cover and give the quality of education required. These are some of the things that we need to do. But I've talked too much. I'll wait. Then when I get the chance, I'll get into more of it later.
But thank you. I think I like the bit about if we do come to a set position, we should share it with the Attorney General so that we know we're on the right path. Professor Stephen Adair, sometimes I find it difficult to describe you. Statesman, international civil servant, educationist, former rector. It goes on and on and on. What are your thoughts about what are the low-hanging fruits for reform that we could do quickly? It's been suggested that, for instance, we come up with innovative school management practices. We should look at how we pay going forward. What are your thoughts on the look ahead?
First of all, let me quickly do an acknowledgement, though I know the time's not there, but I have 3 seniors there. I can't speak without acknowledging them. My older brother, Professor Emeritus Adair Mensah, actually, he's an expert.
Please, a round of applause.
Despite being a chemist, he's an expert in senior secondary school. He's written more on it than any Ghanaian I know of in publications. So I want to acknowledge it. And I also have my mentor there, Professor Sawyer there. And I can tell you that the oldest is Mr. person here is Poku, who is... So I have to, during our age, you have to do that. Secondly, let me do 2 declarations in terms of probably today, my wife and I founded the biggest private school in the nation, Ghana Christian International High School, in terms of numbers, about 3 times secondary school, that of GIS, TIS, and SOS combined. So I'm also must acknowledge that I come from Hiromwasi. And the Hiromwasi is very important in this context, not because of that. We have in Hiromwasi, probably, in terms of academic results of WASI, percentage passes, the leading secondary school in Ghana over the last 6 years. And it has a lesson, so let me bring it, bearing on it. My wife and I felt, what can we do for those of us who come from our village? And we were led by the Lord to say, establish a secondary school there. And when we had the first admission 10 years ago, after 1 month, I went there to visit them. Now they have about 842 students, so it's big by the old standards. All the children were very quiet. I said, hey, this is unusual for a school. Wherever I went, everybody in the 3 classes were quiet. So it occurred to me that actually the student didn't understand anything that was being taught them. So I called the teachers and I said, something serious is happening. Because good students will be quiet, but for everybody to be quiet like this, please stop it. They can't understand anything you are teaching following your syllabus. So I said, and this didn't come from any textbook. I said that the first term, I want you to do only 3 things. Computing, and we have, fortunately, the first thing we did was to have a Wi-Fi satellite there, so they have access to computer like any school. You will get it, even in America, the same. So let them play with that so that they come up to Achimota standards. The second is that you are going to spend 1 term on only 2 subjects, mathematics and English. Number 3, you are starting from class 1. And then they say that, of course, they wouldn't use the word, but from their face, you must be crazy, Prof. Class 1 in secondary school, Form 1. I says, please, I beg you. If you take class 1 and 3 days, they finish it, you know that they have finished class 1. And you go to class 2, class 3. Because when there's a gap, especially in mathematics, if you don't know how to add, you don't know how to multiply. You can't. After 1 term, doing this alone, when I went going by, I knew that a change had come. They were laughing. They were asking questions. They were doing the normal things students do in a class. So we continued that one for 1 year before we started. Then by the second term, we started introducing some general science, things which they enjoy. They ended up with 4 years. So in the school now, we serve only 12 villages. Now we have extended it to about 15. About 15% of the students, when they come alone, can go to the 3 years. The rest have to do 4 years, laying the foundation. And the result is that for 6 cohorts, only 5 individuals didn't qualify to go to university and higher education the first time. 6 years continues. I'm saying this because you mentioned it, but it's so important. The average public school, the World Bank in 2016 described Ghana public primary school as schooling without learning. And that is a very tragic situation which is affecting the secondary school today. Number 2, now they have said that things. Let me just answer you because you didn't ask me to give a lecture. I think that at this moment, even though the Constitution, everything say free SHS, and giving the legal interpretation, my learned friend, whom we taught in school, but they say we are not learned. It should be not leaving anyone behind. And that immediately changes. So that, for example, I believe that there are about a quarter of Ghanaians who, at this moment, if they are given the chance, will volunteer to pay their children's fees. A quarter straight away. And have just by chance, not by sampling, 3 people have said that they are spending between 10,000 to 20,000 a year in public secondary school, including Presec, I can mention name, Accra Guest. So those people will be willing to pay 15,000 to get quality education for their children. The government then will have responsibility of making sure that the Hiramoasi and Dokrochua people are also giving their schools improved to a certain level. If the goal is not leaving everyone behind, then you allow other things to go, some people to go ahead and then see to the most vulnerable and get them up and not having all cap fit all. Let me just only add one because I'm jumping to the long run. In the long run, no country in the world has been able to educate his youth in boarding schools. And therefore, we should be thinking of how to get quality day schools. The school in my village is a day school. They come from within 20. And that is important. And it's cheaper and easier because what we have done there is that the teachers are resident in the school. We make sure that all the teachers are there. They have all the qualities. They have the lab. They have everything else. And the children come and go home. if you go anywhere, and all of you here have traveled everywhere, everybody goes to secondary school in their neighborhood. In fact, if you go to Britain, when they say public school, they mean private fee-paying school. And that is for only 5%. And this is the long run. But this is my
Those are your preliminary thoughts. Thank you. And some have already started sending some questions ahead, but I'll mention the phone number. It's 055-339-8483. 055-339-8483. And just to segue from where Professor Ade left off, there's a question here that says, don't you think all parents and guardians whose children or wards are enjoying free SHS should submit their TINs or Ghana cards to the GRA for income tax assessment? And that's from Kofi Shababashi. And I think it comes to the point where a lot of parents are frustrated about the process and feel if it's supposed to be free, yet aspects are costing me a lot of money, then what do we do? Let me also read this other one, which also relates to tuition. Then I'll come to our keynote speaker just to give us a quick thought, and then I'll come to Ace. It says, is it free SHS or tuition-free SHS? I don't know of any country in which the government pays for transportation to and from high school for day students, accommodation and feeding for boarding students. I believe that families and not governments should be responsible for everything other than tuition for high school students. Every family pay for these in addition and tuition when it sends its kids to private school. The government of Ghana can then put its resources into other things. That's from Obodai Sai from Ebri. Yes, our keynote speaker, please, your quick thoughts, and then we go to
I think lawyer has set the foundational principle upon which probably we should have built the policy in the first place. Because what the law, the Constitution actually demands is that we do it progressively and factored in the issue of availability of resources, and then also to the extent feasible. So these two things qualify what we should have been doing as a country. And so what we did was probably jumping the gun. We just went ahead of ourselves. Maybe, and that is why in my presentation I said maybe it was driven by political ambitions, wanting to say we've done it. And so we didn't settle for the fundamentals to ensure that we build a system that is robust and that can be sustainable. And so for me, the very, very first problem I have is the name we even gave it, Free Senior High School. Free Senior High School. What does that mean? Because from the analysis I gave you, government is only contributing 1,200 cedis, a little over that. And parents are contributing 4,000 and over. So to what extent is it free? So maybe if we had said that government was giving scholarships, just like we had from the Northern scholarships, and the Cocoa Board CMB scholarships and the government scholarship itself. If government has said, I'm giving a scholarship, and therefore the amount I will give you to attend school every year is 1,000 cedis. In that case, we could have identified students who have needs beyond 1,000, who probably, even if you said they should pay 1,000 as admission fee and prospectus and all that, they couldn't pay. Government could have identified those ones. And those who need just 1,000 to break through could have been supported. So I think that going forward, we should be realistic of ourselves. We should understand our conditions, and again, to take from what Professor Ade is saying, that indeed the goal should be that we give opportunity to every single child by leaving no child behind. So if some can pay so that it will cover the cost of others, let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion. Let's all agree that as a country, this is what will work for us. Because we don't have everything we need. And there are many, many schools. And the example he gave is very common. They are fortunate that you went in to introduce an intervention that worked. There are many thousands of communities where the schools are like that. And therefore, we need to have this at the back of our mind. Is it just to put them through the 3 years of senior school, spending the 1,200 every year for them, and then at the end of the day, they don't get anything out of that? Or we really are intentionally deciding that we want to give them skills and competencies for the future?
So we need to reform the financing strategy that we've adopted so far. Yes, Ace, then I'll come to you, Iramu.
Well, I hear Prof. and I hear you. I have news for you. As far back as 2011, the Supreme Court decided that a fee-paying option does not violate the right to free education. That's settled. And so the government, for example, can decide that the education that it is able to offer is tuition. Everything else, it is unable to offer it. Remember, the qualification is that it must be available of resources and it must be feasible. And so the government can say, look, we just don't have the funds, so we will do that. But we'll come to I'll give you criticisms of my own position as we go on. Now, and so in 2011, okay, let me just go back. The fee-paying option has always been with us. Let's not, even though the tuition was free, if your child did not make the admission mark at O-level to get into sixth form, the option existed to pay tuition for the child to go to sixth form. So even before 1992, there was the fee-paying option, which could get your child who did not make the cut to go to school. Often, we confuse admission with qualification. Several students qualify, but only a few get admission because they target to an amount of money that the government is producing. And so, in 2011, the Federation of Youth Associations of Ghana sued all the public universities. That what they were doing was that in the milieu when we're supposed to get into progressively free tertiary education, they have introduced a fee-paying option ostensibly targeted at foreign students, but now we're admitting Ghanaians, and they were expanding the fee-paying option and thereby reducing the non-fee-paying option. And so they went to the Supreme Court that this was unconstitutional. I got hired by the public universities as their lawyer. And I looked at it and said to them, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we have to get cute. We have to get cute. Let's look at the statistics. And then they showed us that really admission is tied to how much the government makes available. So there's some study that determines this is how much it costs to educate a tertiary student. So when the government provides the money or gives them the budget, they then determine how many people will be admitted. And so there will be several who have qualified but don't get admitted because there's no space and there's no money. And so what they decided to do was that then you can pay and come in. Now, we looked at the statistics and we presented a lot of statistics to the court. And if you look at the judgment of Justice Sophia Idinyira, she actually quotes the statistics, which showed that often when the government money delays, it is the fee-paying option money that is used to run the universities. The cost sharing, right? And that swayed the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court said that, well, Article 25, like I said, should be read together with Article 38. The state has a duty to provide equal and balanced access, subject to the availability of resources. The universities had every right to use legitimate means to raise money to fund their activities as funding from the state was inadequate. Instead of university, read secondary school. This is 2011. And this is the Supreme Court's interpretation of the right to free education. That the universities, but also the secondary schools, have the right to use legitimate means. The fee-paying policy option does not limit the quota of regular students admitted to the universities. Because as we have shown, the government gives a certain amount of money and it can only admit so many students. Right? But on the contrary, the universities use part of the fees from the fee-paying students to supplement the non-fee-paying students, thus allowing the universities to admit more students. The Supreme Court said that Ghana has unique educational challenges and economic imbalances, and Article 25 aims to address these imbalances and improve education quality. Education quality, by, particularly through science and technology. The court said that the phrase equal educational opportunities ensures that people have the same chances in life without unfair treatment due to their background or status. That is why I will caution those who say that let it be free for the poor, and those who can afford to pay should pay. Kofi Sabashi, who sent the question, is a tax man. And some believe that everybody who is benefiting, parents who is benefiting from free education, should file, to get a tax identification number, file your tax returns, and get whatever tax certification there is, so that we can begin to investigate as to whether or not you are really poor. It will bring more people into the tax net if you must you must get a tax identification number before your ward registers in school. Then we can begin to track you and do the means assessment. But let's get this. It says that the ultimate objective of Article 25 is to make free education free by a gradual and progressive introduction of free education at all levels. And that is why they dismissed the plaintiff's action. They believe that cost sharing is possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, within the environment of free SHS, even before we introduced it, the Supreme Court has held that it is possible to have a fee-paying option. So this is the suggestion. Let the government determine how much it is given, like they stated in the budget. There's enough science to determine how much can be spent per student to give that student quality education. We can decide to spread it among all students and then ask everybody to top up. Or we can decide that we are giving it to specific students to ensure that they get the quality, and then those who do not make it on admission will pay. Then we look at what I will call weighted merit, where it is not just your grades. It is your grades as a function of the classification of your school. So that if you go to the Mfansums and, I have to mention it first, Mfansums and Achimotas and Prempers and Presex, where you get a certain, presumably, that's why it's graded A. And your parents can afford the after school, vacation classes, private tuition, etc., etc. Your entry qualification is different from the one from Riamwase. And this is doable. The science for calculating this exists. So that those then get admitted. The others who do not make it into admission will be asked, can you pay? And for them, the government can provide additional scholarships for those who really cannot afford it and didn't make it. And my point is that it is doable if we will stop talking at each other and start talking to each other. And the politicization is too much. The partisanship is too much. Can we talk to each other and find ways of doing this? I am saying that it is legal, at least from my reading, and the case that I was involved in, when I told the Vice Chancellor, let's get cute. Let's bombard the Supreme Court with the facts. If they face the facts, they won't say this is wrong. And we did. And the Supreme Court came back and said, you know what? Go ahead and do your fee-paying option. So we can do it. If it could work for universities, just replace universities with secondary school, and we can do it.
All right. Thank you very much, Ace, for that. So, Irama, there are other things that relate to reforms. For instance, who manages the food. There are other things relating to the quality of teaching and learning. I mean, it was heartbreaking to hear that some teachers haven't had rest. They've been teaching all year because of double track. There's research that said that most parents want the double track to go. There's the restoration of PTAs that have happened. What for you are the other things that you would like to see?
I'd like to see, well, we've talked about the possibility of having more day schools, which is a great idea. But it still comes back to the heart of the way our teachers have been trained. And I'm glad that there's a good case study from Prof. Adai about how a day school has done well. But speaking to teachers from day schools, the new day schools, a lot of their schools did rather poorly. And part of the reason is that the teachers are not properly trained and school management is not properly trained to handle day schools. You handle day schools differently from how you handle a boarding school. And so I think it also comes back to the heart of how we are training our teachers to handle the students that come in. So even though I would like to see a lot more community day schools, I think we also have to invest in, number one, having teacher accommodation on campus, and number two, training the personnel to be able to handle students who are day students, because they are different from boarding students. And then the third thing is we also need to think of ways of making it possible for day students to learn in a conducive environment. The last time we had Achimota speaks, and I think Reverend Afo Blaze spoke, she spoke about St. Thomas Aquinas and how she had helped it to become a pseudo boarding school in her day so that students could pass. We don't want to have that story repeated. We want students to be able to be day students fully, going home, and still being able to pass their exams, which means we need to invest in community libraries. It means we need to think of the possibility of opening schools and having teachers supervise, and that's why students need to be on campus. So we need to not only think of having day schools as the solution, but all the attendant training for teachers and school management. And then another thing I would mention is, and Prof. Adai alluded to that, we need to give different ability learners different opportunities. For those who aren't doing as well, we should give them the extra year to study so that they can do better. I don't think it's right for us to rush them through 3 years and then they go home and resit and resit and resit and resit to get in, when we could have trained them in a better manner on school campus with teachers so that they would do well. That's what I want to say.
So for you, more day schools, but in a culture where people's alma mater is strongly tied to the bonds that they've built, and it's not only in Ghana, in Nigeria too, it is same, because I went to school there, so I know. Every state has their state boarding school, they have their federal boarding schools, and a lot of them must go there. And I remember as a child, when I didn't immediately get into one, I wanted to go to one. Yeah. So I don't know about the culture we have as a people.
I don't think our original boarding schools need to be collapsed. That's not what I'm calling for. But I'm saying that we should open more day schools so that the access can be true access, quality access, and it should be broadened.
All right, let me take this question before I come to you, Prof. It says there was a point where there was a debate on 3 years versus 4 years for SHS. Will Prof. Adai propose that we revert to 4 years? Will this generally improve the quality of education? That's from Tete Paddy, OAA 89. I didn't know the question was for you. I just happened to read it, so I'll let you answer that.
Okay. Me and my older brother, Father Mensa, we don't agree on many things.
But you agree on 4 years.
But we agreed on one thing, that we should keep the 3 years.
Okay. 3 years.
That I think that it's not a question of 3 or 4 years. You know, everywhere in the world, where university is 4 years, pre-university is 12 years. And therefore, if you want ours to be 13 years pre-university and go to university for 4 years, you are saying that the Ghanaian child is more stupid than the average in the world, which I detest to see. The answer to the 3-4 years is fixing the pre-secondary school. And unless we do that one, then even when you give 15 years, you still not get a solution. So, but now, when I don't have the opportunity to do, the authority to do the primary, that's why when I get the students in my village, even one of them, when he came and he was asked to write his village name, sad to say, was he Adiemara de mean to mean super. To wit, I cannot spell Adiemra. How can somebody who ostensibly has passed BEC, which is by corruption, somebody who cannot write his village name holding a BEC, that's another area which I wouldn't like to go in today, and then I won't finish. That one required this 1 year, and the person, I wouldn't give up, but he is in what I consider as the best undergraduate school in Ghana, SHS. He got a MasterCard scholarship after the 4 years because of that. So you don't rank it. I think that as a nation, we should keep it at 3 years, but fix the primary. And that is. Now, let me just say the day school. Sorry, I'm referring because I consciously, intentionally decided to demonstrate how a day school can be as good as Achimota boarding school. And I did my village research, my own research, and I found that the big difference between the boarding school and the day school in Ghana is the prep in the evening. How can people come to school in Romwasi and then go home and say he's going to study? There's no light in the house. So we close at 2 o'clock like everybody else. We don't allow the children to go home. They have lunch and they stay for 2 hours and do the prep under supervision. That is what has broken the back. So when we say day school, there are quality day schools. Certain things must be in place. You don't just go and say, just treat them like you are finished, 2 o'clock, go home. This is your assignment, go and study. No, he can't, because there's no light in his house. And in any case, if he walks, he's so tired that even when there's light, he will fall asleep. So, and then as I said, the way forward is general days, quality day school. First, the facilities should be the same, and it's cheaper to do so. We built 24 classrooms, everything for 3 million cedis. And if you want to add the accommodation, the expense, their food, and everything else, but we made sure that they have the books, they have the internet, they have a computer. The computer room there, I don't know, Achimota, we may beat you, but at least equal you. And then the teachers live there. Every teacher was given accommodation. And then the children come. So there are other things that go into quality day school. But I believe that we should keep our boarding schools, the grade A schools. You have sufficient people who are prepared to provide the money for Achimota. This whole across enough for Achimota to be, it's all Achimota. But the government can say, hey, we did Achimota, 50% will come as scholarship paid by the across. Finish. You have gotten 50% for free, getting quality education, and let them decentralize, let them manage it themselves. But the money you save, make sure that there's not going to be any D school or E school in Ghana. That's all. And that in their locality, they can go to. There are various ways of doing so. Let me conclude this intervention by saying this. It's the politicization which is killing us. The day before the free secondary school was announced, the powers that be, the day before, I was in my village, minding my business with my school there. And they said that the Minister of Education must see me the following morning at 8 a.m. They think that all of us live around Achimota. But because of respect for authority, you see, I managed to come from over 200 kilometers to meet an appointment at 8 a.m. And they showed me, there were 6 people, they said, what's your view about this? In fact, before we finished 2 hours, they said that the president wants to see you. But at the end of it, these are the 3 things I said. and I still stand by it. Free education, which I mean not leaving anyone behind, is mandatory in this 21st century. 2, I think that those who design it put in a lot of thought. The second track, double track, and everything else was really good. And then the third is that, let me tell you, when you introduce this, there will be a lot of problems. And we have seen it in Uganda, we saw it in Kenya, and other things. We are not the first to introduce it. But I said that at that time, let those, if you don't even want to go out, let those who put it together continuously.